Hello and welcome to Grody UnPrOfeSSiOnAL. My name is Justin McMenamy, and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons I have acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. In this episode, honestly, there's a lot of stories about crying. There's crying in a bar, there's crying on a plane, and there's crying in a living room. With that being said, I hope you enjoy this episode as we peer into what normal looks like for those in their 40s. Lon Stroschein, the man, the myth, the legend. Thanks so much for joining me today on Grody UnPrOfeSSiOnAL. It is so good to have you here today.
You have no idea how long I've aspired to be on a podcast called Grody UnPrOfeSSiOnAL.
There's a lot of questions I want to get to today, but the first question I want to ask you is, you have a nickname. I don't know if you gave it to yourself. I don't know if somebody else gave it to you, but you call yourself a dude from the internet. What is the backstory of being known as a dude from the internet?
Oh man, it's what I sum up the reason people show up and talk to me. The conversations I have with people are really personal, right? They're deep personal conversations that by and large they haven't had with anyone else. And so I get asked the question all the time, why do people come to you? How have you built the trust? Why do they share with you the things they share with you? And how did you become the person whom with people you've never met share these things? And the answer for me is pretty simple, because I'm just a dude from the internet. I don't know their wife or husband. I don't know their boss or bosses. I don't know their colleagues. I don't know their staff. I don't know their problems. I don't know their neighbors. And I've been through and I talk to those problems every day on LinkedIn. I wrote a book about it. I do a podcast about it. I do podcasts like yours that talk about this thing we go through in midlife. They come to me because I'm safe and I'm a dude on the internet. And somehow they came across something I said or did or promoted. And that's just, and if I boil it all down, that's what it is. I'm safe. They can trust me. And I'm a dude on the internet.
So you mentioned a book, and that's what I want to start with. You formerly were an executive at a publicly traded company, and you ended up writing a book called The Trade. Talk to me a little bit about the arc into writing a book, and really what does The Trade focus on? What is The Trade for someone that hasn't heard of that?
I've got to put some meat on this for people who are brand new to this. So your background is exactly right. I worked for a public company for 14 years. 12 of those I served as an executive in that company, a named insider, a named executive. From the outside looking in, and on a lot of days from the inside looking out, I was living my best life. I had checked the boxes. I had lived life by the book. I was putting in the hours. I was achieving milestones. I was doing what I was asked to do, and I was checking the boxes, and I was rewarded through promotion, and I was living my best life, as I said. From the outside looking in, probably every person in my orbit thought, man, that guy's got it together. He's doing exactly what he's called to do. He's on mission. He's doing exactly what he's here to do. And on some days, that's right. But there were a lot of days, Justin, when I would come into my office, I would leave my nice home in my nice neighborhood and drive my nice car to my nice parking spot and go up to my nice office where I would sit by myself and I'd turn on my nice computer and I'd stare at the screen and I'd say, well, is this it? I mean, is this it? Is this as good as it's going to be? And then what would happen is immediately I'd be like, if this is it, shouldn't you just be happy? Can't you just be content with this? Look around you. Look at everything you've got. And so the shame and guilt of having so much and feeling so little would clash. And I'd push down this thought, feeling, wish, dream of doing something else, chasing something else, figuring out what something else is. And I would just live in the moment. I would live in that day. And I'd go back to doing what I did yesterday. So that was me. And I thought I was alone. And that is a key part of Normal 40. Everybody thinks you go through this alone, including me. So there I was in this place and time. What happened, Justin, is I started to lean into this feeling a little more. And I didn't have the courage or maybe even the sense to just quit. And I don't know that is what most people should do, just quit on a whim. But I knew that I had to figure something out. And so I started to try to figure myself out. So instead of hiring a coach, and this is really important, instead of hiring a coach somebody who had been through what I've gone through, somebody who probably could help me figure out what were these emotions to have so much and feel so little. What is that? How do we fix that? I did what a lot of knuckleheads do. I went and I got a coaching certification to self-diagnose myself, to figure myself out. Now, a couple of things. One, I discovered I loved coaching. I didn't figure myself out right away, but I was really good at helping others really get clarity on the type of executive they wanted to be, the type of leader they wanted to be, the type of work they wanted to do, and then help them put a plan together to do that. Well, fast forward, COVID hits then, and it forced all of us, everybody who is going to hear this podcast, it forced you into a different way of looking at the world, me included. And I got thinking about weird things that somebody who's 45 hadn't thought about before, like mortality and people around me. What if I lose them? What if people around me lose me? And so I started to just wrestle with this different. And I started to go back to this feeling. If not this, if my future isn't where my feet are, if I can't find the joy that I'm wired to do, how am I going to find it? And I started working through this process. And I'm going to fast forward about 2 more years because it took me 2 years to figure it out. In February of 2022, I decided my work there was done. I came to that after a dinner date with my wife. She and I were going to a concert in the cities. It was a George Strait concert. Hey, I'm a South Dakota farm kid. What can I say? Love George Strait and Chris Stapleton. They were performing together. He was on my bucket list. And on the drive up, my wife grabs my arm and she says, hey, I want to talk to you about something when we get to Minneapolis. We were driving to Minneapolis. And I'm like, uh-oh. My wife has never said, I want to talk to you about something. And it elicits positive emotion, right? It's usually I'm going to have some explaining to do. And I couldn't figure out what it was. So I'm like, okay, well, but I asked her, I said, can we talk about it now? She said, no, when the time's right, I want to talk to you about something. And I just let it go. So we go to the performance, we go to the concert, we come back out at the end. Music does something to you that's fantastic and awesome, and everybody's going to know what I'm talking about. You release different parts of you at a music concert that's just beautiful. And so we left and we went to this bar, and we're sitting in a nondescript rooftop bar. And it's not very busy. There's probably 40 people in there. And my wife and I are sitting at the corner of the bar having a drink. And she said, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And I said, is this the thing? She said, yeah. It's like, all right. She said to me, unprompted, you're wrestling with something. Now, this is months before I left, months before February of 2022. Well, I can tell you the exact date. I think it was August of 21. And she said, you're wrestling with something. And I was just kind of quiet. And I said, yeah, I am. At this point in my journey, Justin, Raven, the company I was working for, had announced a transaction. We were being acquired. I was the M&A guy. I was the sell side M&A guy. And I was expected to get let go. I was expecting that I was going to be terminated at close. That's what happens to the sell side guy. Always. It's just known. I wasn't emotional about it. I was matter of fact about it. I was out. Well, the acquiring company did something I didn't expect. They offered me an incredible position, an incredible opportunity to stay. And so I was wrestling with, well, if I'm feeling like I should go, but I have this opportunity to stay and it's a guarantee, maybe I should just stay. Maybe I should just check it out. Maybe I should just give this a year or two and see what happens. And at the same time, I had also been presented with an offer to be the president of another company in my home area where I was living. And that was interesting to me. That's the little background in Mindy Says You're Wrestling with Something. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, I've got to tell you something. She said, I don't think your future is at Case. And I don't think your future is with this other company. And she said, I think you can do either of them fantastically. I think you'd be great at either of them. That isn't my point. She said, when I see you coach, when I see you working on Normal 40, when I see you inspiring others to do the hard next thing because they'll regret it if they don't, she said, I see a light in you that I haven't seen in 10 years. And then she said something I will never forget. She said, you're a teacher and you need to go teach. You've got a message that needs to be heard. And if that means we've got to sell our house so you can afford to do this, we'll sell our house. And if it means we need to stand in a food line so that we can afford for you to do this, I'll stand with you. But you need to do Normal 40. Then I'm crying because she called me out. I was standing at the edge of the cliff looking over, and she just came up and pushed me over. And she had confidence in me that I would figure it out. And it was that moment, Justin, that I decided my work here is done. And in this moment, I'm crying in a bar in Minneapolis, and I'm trying to reason through these emotions. And I'm like, maybe I'm not really quitting. Maybe my work here is just done. Maybe I've come to this company and I've done everything I can do for it. I've given it everything I have to give it. And I've taken everything I can take from it. I've learned everything I'm going to learn here. And it's time for me to go use it in a different way. My work here is done. And the moment those words came out of my mouth, I knew what I had to do. I was going to go resign. And that's what I did. And a few months later, I was off and running. So that was the impetus. That was the start of Normal 40.
That is awesome. I want to go back to the moment that you described, sitting in your office. You said the car you wanted, the house you wanted, the life you wanted, the whole shooting match. And then you log in the morning and you're like, is this all of it? Is this everything? Along my career, I've had similar events. It's like my whole life, all the way back to education, all the way back to interviewing, all the way back to career development. Everything was to get to this point. And this point doesn't taste. It doesn't feel the way that I thought it would. And there's actually an emotion, and I'm interested to see if you had it as well. There's almost a little bit of guilt. There's almost a little bit of self-guilt inside of there of like, am I broken? Everybody around me seems to have reached the destination. I'm sitting here at the finish line. I don't feel what I thought I would feel. Did you have that same arc?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And that's kind of where everybody ends up. You go around that horn. It starts with, is this it? And why can't I be happy? And then you think, well, I got everything I wanted. Why can't I just be happy? And in that moment, you can't help but feel guilty. Guilty first for me. I felt guilty first to have so much and feel so little, to want something else. And then I felt shame that I was taking up room in someone else's dream, to have so much of this and to want something else, and then to not know what it is, to not be able to articulate what I would rather have, was maddening. And it would just start this cycle every time. It would start over and over.
I used to call it the corporate sleeper hold, because in a sleeper hold, the more you fight it, the harder it is. The more you go against it, the more difficult it becomes. If you just kind of go limp and let it happen, it's a lot less painful. And I used to wrestle with, why can't I just give in to the corporate sleeper hold? Why can't I just let everything, all these feelings, all these emotions, all these thoughts, just go limp and not worry about it? It would be way easier for the next 30 years if I wasn't fighting the sleeper hold that is this corporate march.
Do you know what's causing that? Why you fight it? It's your potential, man.
For me, it was because that was the dream that I thought I wanted as I started the journey. That was the destination, which was a degree of financial security. And for me, it wasn't cars and houses and vacations and things. It was a degree of financial security that would allow for robustness against downturns, would allow for these things and the enjoyment of being part of something bigger. But as I got to that destination, it felt a lot more like a mirage than a destination.
Yeah, a funny thing happens when you get what you set out to get. Your potential, the person you're really capable of being, shows up, and they start tapping you on the shoulder. And your potential starts saying, yeah, you did this. Well done. But this isn't it. This isn't your full potential. The reason that's important, Justin, I think, is that if you were like me, you decided in your early 20s what we're going to chase for the next 2 decades of our life. When we dedicate 20 years of our life to achieving something, to being very clear on what we define as success, to be very clear on what the goal is, and then to get there, even if it's not all the way there, but you're in the vicinity, you're right where, a few more years you can touch it. You realize the decisions you made when you're 20 on what you want to do with the next 20 years of your life no longer are the same set of self-questions, self-realization, self-analysis, the same questions that you need to ask yourself at 45 for the next 20 years of your life. And your potential comes back. That's when your potential comes back and says, yep, you did this, well done. But you're not 20 anymore. These things aren't as important as they used to be. They're great. They're great. They're fantastic, in fact. And you should be really proud. But the best story of your life and the best years of your life are right here, right now. What are you going to do with them? Because you're not done here.
Right. One of the things that I wanted to talk with you today is that you actually have an open door policy. You set aside a few hours a week that anybody can reach out to you just to talk. You call them rambles, that they're not structured in a sense of a set of questions, but you just want to be a sounding board for somebody that wants to share their story, that wants to brainstorm some things, that wants to think through what the future might be. And you talked about earlier in the conversation that they will tell things to you that they have not told their wife. They will say things that they would never tell their boss. I'm really fascinated. How many of these conversations have you had over the last few years?
753.
Wow. You said it's surprising how quickly people open up and they say things that they have never said to other people. Why do you think that is? That 753 people reached out to a dude on the internet and said things that and open up so quickly in a 1-hour conversation?
They want an answer. They want to feel like they're not broken. They want to feel like they're not alone. And they want to tell someone that has been through it. And they want to share an intimate details about how they're really feeling with someone who can't haunt them with a consequence. Right? And let me talk about that. We said this off the bat. I don't know them. I don't know their community. I don't know their boss. I don't know their spouse, but I do know what they're feeling. I know exactly what they're feeling. And I'm able to articulate on LinkedIn, in my book, in my podcast, probably on your podcast. I am hoping I'm articulating to people, I know what you're feeling, man. I know. And it's going to happen. I named my whole company Normal 40 because guess what? It's normal. It's not abnormal. It's abnormal to never have these feelings and to settle when you're 45 for what you're going to be for the rest of your life. That's abnormal. You'll regret that. It's normal to go through this. So they show up to me with a very little expectation. I'll be honest. They think 40-minute conversation with a dude from the internet cannot possibly change my future. They all think that. And that's part of the plan. That's part of my strategy. Spoiler alert. I don't call it a discovery call. I call it a ramble because I don't want anyone to have any false conception of the fact that 1, they're broken, 2, I can fix them, or 3, we're going to discover anything. We're just going to ramble. Now, the process itself is very scientific. After 753, you get good. You get good at dialing it in. And every conversation follows the exact same arc. And I don't force it. I just know what people are going through. And so they show up because I'm safe, I'm available. And the last thing that's important, Justin, is I still do it for free because it's probably the most fun I have in the week. To watch someone's lights come on for the first time in a decade or a year or whatever it's been, to watch someone's lights come on when they meet themselves again for the first time in years, and some dude from the internet was just able to ramble with them because he's talked to so many others. It is the funnest part of Normal 40, and I hope I never quit doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, I think you touch on them. As I think about both myself in some of these conversations, as well as others I've talked to, there's absolutely an aspect for leaders because many of these people are leaders, either of organizations or in the community. And there's not just their livelihood that is built into their success, but there's the livelihood of others. There's the success of others that are built into their current path. There can be a lot of loneliness at the top. And there can be a lot of people that really, for the good of the organization, they need to keep a brave face. They need to keep looking forward, to keep stability. And so oftentimes these people within their community, they have no person to speak to, no person to talk safely with. When they're talking with you, nothing they can say is going to come back to haunt them. Not that they're talking about skeletons in their closet, but that they're talking about feelings that could really impact an entire organization that says, oh, our leader's not with us anymore. What you offer is both a person that's been there, a person that's felt those things, but also someone that, as you say, allows them to ramble out loud. They can say what's on their mind. They can say what's in their heart. And if it doesn't come out the way they want it to, or it doesn't sound the way they want it to, they can walk it back without it impacting other people. And the other one you touched on, I think a lot of people, they think they might be crazy. When you think about the coast, whether it's Boston or New York or San Francisco, movement, changing jobs, evolution of the career, that can happen monthly sometimes. But as you think about the flyover states, a lot of the big Rust Belt corporations are still in this legacy phase. They're at the end of the phase, but they're still in the phase of 30 years, climb the ladder, stability, loyalty. And when you're in the middle of that, when you're 15 or 20 years into the middle of that, and these feelings of like, hey, I don't know that I want to do 15 more years of this ladder climbing. There's not someone in your community to talk to because your community is surrounded by people at the same company, on the same ladder, with the same goals. There's just not someone that thinks that way, or at least is willing to talk out loud that way. And so I think a lot of the time it's truly people calling you and saying, am I crazy? They need someone to tell them that they're not crazy.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. For a period of my life, I was at the proverbial top. And you were too, Justin. And you can relate. Well, on one hand, when you'd hear, well, it's lonely at the top, it's so dismissive when you're doing well. You say, it's really not that bad. But when you take a step back, especially now after being gone, I can really look back and say, you know what? It really was lonely. And the lonely thing, the loneliest part of it was that for many years, I wasn't able to be fully me.
Yes.
And I didn't, what's scary and why it's lonely is I didn't know if it was safe, when it was safe, where it was safe, and if it was safe for me to be me. Those are the ingredients of what makes it lonely. And those are the people who find normal 40. They're not sure if they're crazy, but they're certain they're not fulfilled anymore to the extent they used to be fulfilled in what they're doing. And they're just looking for a sounding board to talk through, can I get it back? And 40% of them do. 35 to 40% of the people I coach get it back. The others don't. And that's a victory in both directions. Because I don't care. I don't care if you get reinvigorated and stay exactly where you are. I think that's awesome. Or you decide, I'm going to wind it down and I'm going to start doing something else. That's awesome. I don't get a vote. I just care that you have clarity and you go forward. But people show up because they want to feel normal. They want a sanity check. And they're hoping that maybe, just maybe, I'm a person who can help them do it.
What are other common themes? What are themes that you see emerging through these 753 conversations?
There's several, as you might imagine. I'll go over the trends. I've got my notes on what I identify as trends. For the first time in many people's lives, when they call me, they say out loud, the money isn't as important anymore. I still have a mortgage. I still have to have an income. I can't just be absent. But for the first time, I want purpose over money. I've got to find something that makes me feel better than I feel. And I need to find a way to make a living off of it. And so that's always something that comes up. The next thing is this false assumption that whatever they do next or might do next is going to fail. It won't go according to plan. It can't be as good as it's been for other people. And they jump right to how their kids won't be able to go to the college they want and how their house is going to have to be sold. And they jump to this disastrous place that, by the way, I haven't seen happen yet. And keep in mind, I've done this a lot by now. I've not seen it yet or even anything close like that happens. But there is this fear and it's normal. I went through it. It's normal. I get it. But there's the fear of taking the leap. There's a fear of betting on yourself. There's a fear of having the awkward conversation. And so there's this fear of, what do I do with this? I got to do something. I don't know what it is. And it's always everything other than status quo sounds like a risk. And in reality, the only thing that is a risk is the status quo. That's a real big one. And you have to bend people's mind around that. A lot of people want the freedom and want to know if a bet on themselves is possible. Can they do something that somebody else would pay them to do? And can they be successful at it on their terms, using their calendar, using their gifts? And so we wrestle around with what that might be. And nobody ever knows. They'd never call me and say, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and here's my business plan, and blah, blah, blah. Nope. They're at the crossroads of I'd trade what I'd have, but I don't know what I'd trade it for. Those are the ingredients of what people are wrestling with when they call me.
So I want to go a couple of directions here. I myself, being in my 40s, I connect a lot with the feelings and the things that you talk about. We talk about corporate sleeper hold. We talk about the destination that becomes a mirage and all of these things. What would you say to a person that is 25 years old that is listening to the podcast or watching you on LinkedIn, and they aren't feeling these things? To them, they still have a mortgage, they've got young kids, they're looking 3, 4, 5 salary grades up into the organization. They still aspire to those things. They've got a lot to give, but they hear us. They hear us old guys in our 40s talking about this thing, talking about a destination that turns into mirage. For them, it's still a destination. For them, they still strive towards that goal. If we play the game of an ounce of prevention can equal a pound of cure, what advice would you give to someone in their 20s that says, you can start something now, either a thought process or a side hustle? What would you recommend for them to do right now to help prevent what we're describing for many is a huge emotional event of having to turn the ship later in the process of life?
I don't know that I've ever been asked that. I love that question. My son, my older son, graduated high school a few months ago and is now 6 time zones away from me. And I took him to where he is and I dropped him off. And before I left, I did this weird thing for me, a Midwest farm kid who grew up in a house where we don't talk about emotions. I mean, this isn't a thing where we have deep, intimate conversations with our parents and our kids. It just didn't happen. Doesn't mean we weren't loved, doesn't mean any of that. It just, we didn't talk about it. And so I wanted to muster the courage. I've been better, thanks to my wife, way better. She would still tell you that I'm probably emotionally absent sometimes. But I wanted to, in these last moments that I had with my son before I got in an airplane and flew away, I wanted to share with him the things that I was proud of about him and I was excited for because of him. And I wanted to share with him this. In retrospect, I wanted to give him some advice, whether he could take it or leave it, or even understand it as an 18-year-old kid, or 19 at the time, I guess. And my advice was this: in the climb, you're usually trying to satisfy someone else. And when you do, you give part of who you are up to be a little bit more like that person. It's not intentional. It's not a evil trade. It just happens. It just happens because you're climbing and growing. And in the process, after years of doing that, you lose the thing that was you. You lose your voice. You lose who it is you are when you get to sound like you. And my advice for Dawson, my son, my advice for anyone who's listening, and my advice for the 32-year-old who wants to avoid this is never lose your voice. Do something outside of work or inside of work, it doesn't matter, that reminds you of your voice when it's pure and it's not for someone else. It's not somebody else's quarter end. It's not somebody else's demonstration or presentation. It's your voice and what you sound like when you get to sound like you, and defend that vigorously. And the last thing I'll say, Justin, and this one's really quick, and you kind of said it in setting up this question, is know your worth. Know your worth and have more than one avenue of earning it. have a business on the side, do something small on the side. And it does not have to be a financial driver. You don't have to own 30 rental units to cash flow in case you get, no. If you want to do that, great. And if you can do that, fine. But that isn't my point. My point is do something that's a passion project that, by the way, you can use your greatest gifts and your greatest skills towards. And if something happened to you, you've got a whole network of people who know what you're passionate about, know what you're good at, who would be fighting hand over fist to put you to work with them, for them, or around them. Have a plan B.
Yeah. You touched on an interesting point. You said that there are times where you're trying to impress someone else, or you're trying to work to gain someone else's approval earlier in your career. Oftentimes, that person is even the 20-year-old version of yourself. You mentioned earlier doctors and lawyers and even engineers. These people are picking very early in their life the path that they're going to take. And once you've invested 6 years into college, 8 years into college, sometimes the person that you're trying to work for and prove that they're not wrong is the 20-year-old version of yourself. It's not even a boss. It's not even a customer. It's not even a shareholder. It's the you part of it. You touched on it. Invest in a passion project early. For me, the passion project has become this podcast. And it's an interesting thing. In the Midwest, you go and you buy a bunch of podcasting equipment, you buy a domain name, you make up a name for a podcast and start recording, and the common reaction that you get is, so are you trying to become Joe Rogan? My answer back to them is always, hey, if I went and bought a set of golf clubs and I got a membership at the local country club and I went out and spent 3 hours on the afternoon and 3 hours on the weekend hitting the links, you wouldn't ask me if I'm trying to become Tiger Woods, would you? Well, no. So it's to say, focus on what brings passion. For me, the podcast is as much about passing along the experiences and passing along the knowledge. You ask content creators oftentimes, who is your audience? And by and large, the answer is a younger version of myself. It's the myself from 2 decades ago. That's who I'm trying to coach. That's who I'm trying to mentor. And that's who I'm trying to teach. The other part you touched on is don't put all of your chips on one number. When you're 3 salary grades below the goal that you have for yourself, when you're looking at whatever those expectations are that you're hoping to attain by the time you get into your 40s, there is a temptation to put all of the nights, all of the weekends, all of the emotion, all of the energy, all of the focus into that box. In the modern era, you've touched on it. We've all experienced it. The loyalty card doesn't go both ways. The company makes quarterly decisions about who it's going to employ and how many people it's going to employ. And so neither you nor I would propose that someone slough off in their career. I think working hard, striving for a goal, these are fruitful and joyful things. But there is a difference between 120% effort and 90% effort. And my advice to somebody in their 20s would be invest in the main thing, the thing you're passionate about right now, the career, the climb, not at 120%, but at 90%. And use the incremental time and the incremental energy to, using your words, find your voice, find your passion. I love how you said it. We're not looking for incremental income in our 20s. If you don't like changing out toilets at 10 p.m., don't buy a rental house. This isn't about supplementing the income. This isn't about what is sound financial advice. It's about finding a passion outlet. I was wrestling with this over the last week as I was preparing for this conversation, and I think that Robin Williams in Aladdin best summarizes the feeling that the normal 40 can bring. And that is when he says, I have phenomenal cosmic power and an itty-bitty living space. For many, you get there, you get to the destination, and you think that you're going to have all of this authority, but you're constrained, not necessarily by the business. You're constrained in who you get to be. I love that question because I love trying to teach the younger version of myself how to avoid some of the pitfalls, roadblocks, and treachery that can sneak up on you.
Yeah, I love that, dude. And I agree with everything you said. Your podcast, I want to hit on that for just a minute because this is going to be one more piece of advice for that 32-year-old. What you're doing right now is your art. What I'm doing right now in my writing books, coaching people, is my art. Some people's art is music. Some people draw. Some people mold clay. This is my art. And my advice, and I gave it to Dawson, it was in the same spirit. I have given it to others. Never lose your art in whatever it is. And art, and it goes back to exactly what we were just talking about. Sometimes you don't get paid for your art, financially anyway. You always get rewarded for your art because it's yours and it's pure. And you don't have to explain it to anybody who doesn't deserve to have it. It's your art. And if you can pay attention to your art and never lose it, you're going to do really, really well on every page in the book of your life. Never lose your art.
That's right. And even for the 35 or 40% that go through the conversation with you and land in a passionate position of staying in what they're doing, I'm guessing oftentimes there's a change coming through that conversation that they now modify their investment strategy of their energy and their passion. They invest in their art, in their voice. They invest in some passion over and above the career side of it and the professional side of it, if you will.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. My investment in my art goes back to the year 2019. I invested in myself to become an executive coach. I had no idea that I would use it to build a life, literally build a lifestyle around. A few years later, no idea. But I listened to my art. I did what felt pure. And I enjoyed helping people discover who they wanted to be next and how we could get there. I just did. That was my art. And I didn't realize I was good at it until after I started doing it. And so never lose your art.
Awesome. So I want to flip the coin. There are executives, there are company owners that across this country are now finding out that they have employees in their business. These are employees that are the future of their business. These are the high potential young executives that have an emerging mindset that says, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. That's a very concerning realization for an executive that's hoping to set up a 20 or 30-year legacy. They've invested 20 years in a person. What are the things that businesses could do for people wrestling with the normal 40 to create an environment that allows them to find their art, to find their passion, and stay and help the business versus evacuation?
The first thing I would say to every one of them is the next time you're in a staff meeting and you've got all of your elite high performers, your elite performers around you, the people you've handpicked to be there, at least one of them is feeling like everything you and I just talked about, Justin. I promise you. And you will not know which one. They are too good to let you know. So know that. One of them is thinking about doing something else. And they don't want more money to stay. That's not it. So your question now is, so what can you do about it if you're the CEO? You have to really pay attention to what they really want. And I know what they want because I've asked them 753 of them. What do you want? That is one of my questions I have in my script. What do you feel? What do you have? What do you want? And it doesn't matter if they're a teacher, just trying to feel good about being a teacher again because it's the bureaucracy's getting so gross, or they're a cop, or they're even a pastor, let alone a C-suite guy or a doctor or an attorney. The feelings are all the same. They want to not be controlled by their calendar. They want some freedom. Okay? They want some freedom. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like? It's not just time. It's not just like, oh, this meeting's a burden. You don't have to do that. No, that's not it. That's not the freedom they're looking for. The freedom they're looking for is the freedom to execute on something without you second guessing, third guessing, or throwing some roadblock in their way. They want the freedom to do the job you hired them to do, the autonomy to carry it out, and the trust to do it their way. Now, if it doesn't work, guess what? Those same people will stand in that. And if they're not up for the job and they were able to do it their way and they get canned, guess what? They'll own it. But if it works and it works the way they think it can work and you let them do it, they're never leaving. They are never leaving. And by the way, that's hard for a CEO because the CEO got there by knowing a little bit of everything about a little bit of something. It's really hard for a CEO to say, my reputation is on the line if you do this right or not. And I have an opinion on a right way and a wrong way. And you're starting to do it a way that I wouldn't do it. Now, what are you going to do, CEO? Are you going to interject and make them more like you? We talked about that. That's a dangerous thing. Are you going to make them more like you? Or are you going to trust them to deliver a product? Hold them accountable to the deliverable, not the process. And if you can do that, that's the freedom and the control that they want. And the last thing, and maybe this overrides all of them, is give them a chance to know who they are when they get to sound like themselves. This goes all the way back to what people want. They want to know what their voice sounds like when they get to sound like themselves and be free of fear of consequence. There's the key. I promise you, CEO, your team respects you. They want to perform for you. They want to surpass your expectation, but they don't know that they can trust you with how they really feel. They don't know if they can be that candid. So if you open that up, you're going to have a team that's motivated, working on the things that they want to work on. They're going to be impassioned by the freedom they have to do what they're good at. And if you can make them feel like you've got their back, you're going to be running a company, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, that will be unstoppable. But guess what? There's risk in that for you too. And you got to accept that.
That's right. There's a lot of organizational theory. There's a lot of history that's written on this. So many organizations are structured under top-down process conformance. The shareholder wants a strategy. So the senior executive transfers the strategy into a pipeline or transfers it into a process. And then just really from there on, it's execution. And what you're touching on is people desire, you use the term, to know their voice. I've used the term in the past, personal liberty, the ability to take risk, the ability to learn, the ability to experience. I've used the analogy before. We've all been on those car rides at Disney World or Disneyland. The steering wheel does nothing. There's a track that's made out of concrete, and welded right down the center of that concrete is a steel rail. And the car is just going to bounce down that track. You can touch the steering wheel if you want. You cannot touch the steering wheel. Either way, the car is going to just keep going. It's about halfway through your career that you start to realize this wheel does nothing. It doesn't matter if I touch the wheel or not. It's just going to keep moving along. In a similar way, a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, they start this experience of, I don't want you to tie my shoes. I want to tie my shoes. I don't want you to feed me. I want to do it. And it's about that mid-career where it's like this thing is happening with or without me. I don't want you to do it for me. I want to learn how to do it. I want to go for it. And what you're touching on is modern structured businesses are largely incompatible with allowing for degrees of autonomy across the organization. Most organizations are comprised of processes and approvals that are created for the least common denominator. Lon, no one is calling you that is the least common denominator. The person calling you is the one that has been nothing but constrained by all of the least common denominator processes and is caught in this corporate sleeper hold and is saying, I don't want more pay anymore. I want to have my hand on the wheel of something, even if that something is not a billion-dollar organization, even if that something is a podcast, or even if that something is my own artwork. I want to have my hand on the wheel of something. And I think you touched the point. The creative business owner that finds a way to balance structure with chaos. And he's going to use the term chaos. Not only is that executive going to retain employees, but there is ample literature that says that is the sweet spot of growth. The balance of structure to scale on an existing way of doing business, but thinking elastically about the market, about the customer, about the competition, and about technology to expand the business into new spaces. Businesses that find a way to enable and equip people to try that, to operate that way, they will not only retain people, they will grow their business at a higher rate than the free market.
Oh, man. Well said. It's interesting. Early in my career, I was rewarded again and again and again for my creativity. My creativity was the thing that propelled me forward, doing things like other people wouldn't, and having this vision and pushing into it and leaning into it and just knowing what my art was and what my gifts were and using them. And as I grew up in business and as I got closer and closer and closer to the top, the very thing that rewarded me when I'm early career became the thing that frustrated me late career because I couldn't use my creativity. It went from the thing that I was rewarded for to the thing that if I was too creative, I got punished for it. That's not what we do. We can't send that message. We can't do it that way. So it's no wonder. I mean, let's go full circle. What's the CEO to do? Sometimes just let people do things their way. Give them the what. They've got to know the what. You CEO, you board chairman, you board member, you set the what. You set the where you're going, but the how, if you dictate the how, you really, really stifle your team's ability to feel rewarded for their art, for their real capabilities, for their uniqueness in what they can do for the company. Because now you told them how. And really what you don't need is a leader, you need a manager. And if that's what you want, that is what you're going to get. And maybe that's what you do want. And if that's what you do want, keep telling them how, because that's what you're going to have, I promise you.
Lon, as we wrap here, there's one aspect of your book that hit me right in the heart. I was on a plane from Frankfurt to Madrid when I read The Trade. And when I got to a chapter, which is later in your book, I'm on a plane with people around me and there are tears streaming down my face. And that is the story of your daughter, Grace. Would you share for the listener the story that you share in The Trade of your daughter, Grace?
Yeah, of course. Man, I don't really know where to start, but I'll just start as a dad who was busy, a dad who was an achiever, was a leader and a doer and a provider and all the things that parents are. I also worked pretty hard at being present and being available, but I also was probably better at being busy. And my daughter went through something when she was right around the age of 16. And she had an experience with a boy that didn't go the way she wanted it to go. And it went a little further than she wanted it to go. And hats off to my daughter. After a little time, she sat Mindy, my wife, and I down, her mother and I down, and she told us what happened. And through tears and emotion and all of the things, she told us. Then we paid very close attention to Grace. How is she gonna respond to this? And through the course of time, we felt she was doing really well. Her friend group was solid. She was happy. She was the captain of the cheer team in high school now, and it was her senior year. A year and a half, 2 years had gone by. And in my mind, that chapter's closed for her. She survived it. It's over. And so I was avoiding it now, not for the sake of avoiding. I didn't feel like I needed to go there. But unbeknownst to me, deep down inside of Grace, it hadn't gone away. She felt sharing how she was feeling with us was a burden to us. As we talked about all the blessings that we have in our life, and she knew she had a lot of blessings. She had a loving family, she had a nice house, she had great relatives, she had loving friends, and she still felt horrible. She was struggling, and so she felt like she was the problem. Okay, so there's that background. Now fast forward to busy dad. At the time, I was the executive director of corporate development, leading mergers and acquisitions for a public company. The public company I worked for had sold. And it was the night of the celebration party. And that's the night when all of the people who come to make a big, it's a $2.1 billion transaction. It was substantial. So you have the A team, not only, you've got the A team in the industry, JP Morgan Chase and Joel Frank, and just the biggest names in M&A were coming to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where we lived, to celebrate. And I remember it was the night before my last day at Raven. I was coming and I was doing my goodbyes. And then later that night was this big party, the big celebration that we were all going to go to. And it was just going to be, all right, crowning achievement of a career. Here we go. And so I was leaving Raven and I came home really quick to change clothes. And then I was heading to the party. I can probably get you within 1 square foot of where I was when my phone rang. It was my daughter. And I remember driving and I look at my phone and I can see it's Grace. And I put the phone back down to ignore it. And something in that moment grabbed me. And I'm like, nah, you just answer it. And so I picked up the phone and I answered it. I said, hey, Grace, what's up? And she's quiet. And she said, and I could hear some emotion. And she said, Dad, I'm not well and I need to go to the hospital. Okay. That's the first thing she says. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, cheerleading practice. She got hurt in a stunt, something like, okay, what's up? What happened? And I was quick. What's up? Can we, give me the problem so I can solve it. And she said, I'm having bad thoughts and I need to go talk to someone about it. I remember thinking at the time, can't this wait? And I'm pretty sure it came out of my mouth where I said, can we talk about this in the morning? I'll be home in the morning. Let's just talk about this in the morning. I tried to just brush it away. And then she said something I will never forget in the rest of my life. She said, Dad, I'm not good and I need you to believe me. I need you to believe me. The message I was giving her was that I don't believe you. It's not that bad. Get over it. So I collected myself. I pulled over and I turned back around. I said, Grace, I'll be home in 10 minutes and then we'll do whatever you want to do. And she wanted to go to a behavioral health hospital. And that's what we did. I will, spoiler alert at the end, she's doing fantastic today. Absolutely fantastic. In fact, she changed her major from nursing to mental health because she wants to be a counselor to help the people going through what she went through. So hats off to this girl. Her mom got home and we took her to the behavioral health hospital. For those of you who've never been through that, which is probably most of your listeners, it's a different experience. And what they do pretty early in the process is they separate you. So Mindy and I went one way and Grace went another way because they have to get to the bottom of what's going on. And so she's with the doctor, but we are too. They're interviewing us. And probably after an hour and a half or 2 hours, they came back and they sat all of us down in a room. And the doctor shared with us what Grace was feeling. And then he said, she needs to be admitted here. But there's only one problem. We don't have any room for her. But we'll have room for her tomorrow. So can we send her home with you? And then you just bring her back in the morning. And of course, the answer is, well, yeah, of course. Then came the conversation that I'll never forget. The doctor says, okay, one more thing before you go home. Do you have any guns or sharp objects like knives in the house? And of course, you answer that. And then you realize why they're asking. After the first, like, what kind of a question is that? Then you realize, every step of the way, you realize the severity. But when a doctor looks you in the face and says, your daughter's having the types of feelings that would necessitate you extinguishing, removing any form of harm in your house. And you better take it seriously because that's how serious this situation is. What we ended up doing is Grace ended up sleeping in our bedroom with Mindy, and I ended up sleeping on the couch. And let me tell you something. When you're sleeping on that couch after that conversation, after just about skipping that for a party, you do some math that you didn't expect you would need to do on the decisions you're making, the way you were acting, and the things that are really important. You get a different perspective. And you do some deep soul searching in that moment. The nights and weekends and travel, and you just told about flying from Frankfurt to Spain, those grueling hours. Some of that you signed up for, some of you didn't. But in all of that is the stuff that might be happening right in your own home that you didn't sign up for. And if you're not careful, you can walk right past it until it's too late. So the message is be present enough to know what's going on in your house.
Yeah. What that story for me brings into crystal clear focus, and why I'm so glad that you had the courage to write it, is that every day there are these minor decisions. Am I going to take that call at dinner, or am I going to return the call in the morning? Am I going to check my email, or am I going to give my full attention to the basketball game? These minor decisions every day, it's easy to rationalize that they don't cost. And what your story for me, because I have a daughter, she was 10 at the time, her middle name is Grace. So as you're saying Grace, this is my daughter's name. And what it brought into crystal clear focus is that those tiny transactions add up. Those tiny transactions cost. And that doesn't mean that we don't work. It doesn't mean that we don't work hard. But it's so easy in the fog of war, if you will, to think that those tiny little email checks, those tiny little glances to the phone don't add up. And for me, it was just a watershed of conviction. And what I love about your courage with putting that story in there is just the reminder to all of us to be there. Not just for the shareholder, not just for our team, not just there for the executive. Those things will fade away. Those loyalties are not anywhere close to the impact that we have on our children, the impact we have on our spouse, the impact we have in our parents as they age, the impact that we have in our community and with our family. And I think that story summarizes that so succinctly because it was the crowning achievement of your professional career. It was the night to celebrate a transaction that took nearly 2 years to come to fruition. The contrast of those two events just really brings that into crystal clear focus.
Yeah, man. Thank you for all that. It was the last chapter I wrote, and I wasn't sure I was going to include it. I shared it with my publisher, and of course I shared it with my wife. And I, of course, shared it with Grace. And I asked her if I could write it. And she said, yeah, Dad, you can write it because I want to help people too. I want to help people navigate this. And so I wrote it. And I told Grace, I'm like, hey, I want you to read it before I submit it. And I gave her a copy, a hard copy. And she took it and I said, hey, I want to say something first, though. I said a couple things. One, of course, I want you to fact check it. But two, I need to give you a warning because you know this story through your lens, Grace. You know how you lived it. You know what happened to you. You know how you endured it, but you don't probably fully appreciate the story from a dad, how a dad lived it, and how I wore it, and how I negotiated with myself through it and continue to, and how I struggle now with my decisions. So you're going to read it from a different perspective, mine, and it's going to be hard. If you don't want it, it's gone, but you do need to know it. And she came back up 35 minutes later crying, and she said, Dad, it's beautiful. I had no idea. It's beautiful.
That's so awesome. Lon, as we wrap here, how can people get a hold of you?
Oh, man. First thing I want to say is find a way. The easiest thing, send me an email at lon@normal40.com. Find me on LinkedIn. I try to make myself visible and available and approachable, as we talked about. Buy my book, not because I'm going to make $4.13 when you do, but because it just might get something out of you that you can't possibly imagine. And I know it because it happens. It's the best work of my life. It really is. It's my best work of my life to this point. So buy the book and enjoy it. And then you can go to normal40.com and you can find me there. But just know I'm not an avatar. I'm not just somebody who you can't approach. I've got a community that you are in and you help lead called The Insider. It's a beautiful place just to meet people who are where you are at in the journey. So anyway, that's the ways they can reach me. And I really, really hope that they do.
I would also put a plug in for the Audible version of The Trade. You can listen to the entire book, tears and all, from the hotel in Frankfurt to collecting your luggage in Madrid. Lon, it is so good to spend time with you. It is so good to hear the story, to hear the arc. We didn't get to talk about it. Your metric is to receive 1,000 notes of thanks. Your goal is to imprint lives for people that feel that they're trapped, feel that they're caught in something that they don't want to continue in. And like you said, 40% of them stay where they are, but are remotivated, re-energized, and reframed in their situation. While others, you help them in the search for that which motivates them, inspires them, and allows them to hear their voice. I'm so appreciative for your passion, for your conviction, for your story, and definitely for your time sitting down with me today to share with the Grody and Unprofessional audience.
Oh, man. Look, Justin, let me just say I enjoyed it. It's been really a joy for me to get to watch you in the last 6 or 8, 10 months since we met. It's been so cool to watch how people respond to you and your wisdom and your common sense approach to things that they're wrestling with too, man. And I love the podcast and I love what you're doing because I know it's not easy. It looks easy. The same person who's wondering why do a podcast, when I'm trying to be Joe Rogan, can't possibly imagine how many hours you put into what people are hearing right now. And so, dude, thanks for doing you. Thanks for doing it. It's not all that grody or all that unprofessional, but I love it all the same.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, man. I will see you on the next page, man.
For those that wish to share comments, praises, leadership topics you would like us to discuss, or to convince me that you actually are steering the cars at Disney, you can reach me at justin@grody.io. For executives that would like more information on perfecting the corporate sleeper hold, I would refer you either to the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, or my personal favorite, Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.